The Gifted Season 2. This is my spoiler review. I have a mostly spoiler-free review on my blog, soundedbetterinmyhead.com. So if you want to check that out instead of this, go ahead. If not, I'm going to be throwing out a fair amount of spoilers here. So it was a fairly lackluster season this year. It just seemed like there was a lot of time sitting around this season waiting for something major to happen, and it just never really, came to be. Reva's whole thing was just so secretive. She's training everybody for this big mission, and that leads up to the mid-season finale where they end up deactivating all these mutant restraint collars and free some mutants from detainment. And number one, they set it up like whoever they rescue was like possibly somebody really cool as far as like the X-Men mythos goes. You got this person in the hood, you don't see who they take, you're just hoping it's somebody really cool, and it's just some character they just seem to have made up for the show. They didn't put that little extra layer of like mystery in it. I think she would have been a better addition to the show. Instead, it's kind of like, I was hoping this was going to be somebody else. And then the whole thing about the collars being deactivated really also led nowhere. Yeah, they added a couple other evil mutants to the team, but the major ramifications of every prison across the United States having their mutant prisoners, get their powers back, this is never touched upon. And that was just kind of a waste. And then the show going into the season finale, also builds like these secret missions and all this training, and then it just kind of ends up being this kind of half-assed mission where they're just basically gonna blow up the Sentinel Services building, and then apparently blow up, I don't know, every politically based building in Washington. That it was also really, really vague, and just I don't know how they plan on doing this, like even pulling this off. And then also on top of that, I don't see how any of this was supposed to lead to a mutant homeland, a massive terrorist strike by the mutants. I don't see why the humans would just let them go and do their own thing somewhere. And I don't know if you're trying to conquer the country, because even then you're gonna have so much resistance. You're completely outnumbered by the humans. So the whole plan didn't make a lot of sense, and there was just so much. She kept so much close to her vest during the build up to these stories. It was just, I don't know, you didn't know what to expect, and when you got it, it wasn't anything that great. I did enjoy at least the characters this season. I think all the returning characters had really nice story arcs. The Polaris' arc was good. She kind of turned evilish at the end of last season, and they think they pretty gradually brought her back into the fold. Andy, also a nice ending to his story. I thought he was a little abrupt sometimes. He pretty much full evil mutant, ready to kill humans, to kind of turning around and just going back to being a good guy again. So yeah, you've seen that he always missed his family, but then there'll be an episode where he seemed perfectly happy where he's at, and then a couple episodes later he'd be upset again that he's not with his family. So he was a little inconsistent. I like Lauren's growth, in the use of her powers, and her assertiveness. I know a lot of that was from the Von Strucker tapes. That was a kind of an odd plot. I don't know how. I guess there's no good way to explain why a music box could do this to people and make Von Strucker get more assertive. So I guess they didn't even try to explain it, which was just kind of corny. Reed's story was so-so. Him finding out suddenly that he had powers was kind of like, it's an odd, just a little too convenient. That oh look, now he suddenly magically got his mutant powers, and it was just back and forth. You were kind of hoping they would get to the point he would find some cool uses for it, and he rarely did, except for his big moment at the finale where he basically sacrificed himself. Other than that, the rest of the team was just okay. Everybody had their ups and downs, storyline wise. The Blink Thunderbird, relationship was nice. Then it was kind of an odd semi breakup, and then they didn't get a full resolution because they basically didn't kill her off like they made it look like. I really liked pretty solid what they did with the Frost storyline, the Frost sisters, or the Stepford Cuckoos as they would have been in the comics. I did like that they dug in their origin a little bit. You did see that there was 5 of them at one point. They did a good job of Esme being different than the other 2 sisters, you know, slowly becoming, you know, a little more independent. It's kind of weird that they just kind of basically killed them, and she didn't seem too hurt over it. I mean, these are her sisters / clones. Thought she would have been a little bit more upset with Eclipse for taking them out, but I mean, I guess she kind of knew they were evil, but still. Not too much else to talk about as far as the returning characters. The new characters, you know, we get the Morlocks finally. Urg was decent enough. Didn't really add a ton to the show. The Morlocks overall was a little disappointed. I mean, yeah, you had some freaky ones that would have a hard time at, you know, going up in the surface world, but for the most part, didn't really feel like it was from the comics, where these guys are so weird looking and freaky that they just had to stay out of the public eye. I mean, a lot of these mutants there were normal looking, and they just got the M tattoos, not even a tattoo, but the scars that fit in down there. So I was a little disappointed with that storyline. Reva was okay. Her powers were so poorly explained. You never knew exactly what she was supposed to be doing when she was doing this sonic scream or whatever she was doing, and it always looked corny the way she did it. You know, the effects and just to her, you know, her look. So I think that always hurt her and her character and the threat of her, because she was supposed to be dangerous, but you don't know what she was actually really doing to these people. They try to expand a bit more on the Purifiers, but in the comics, the Purifiers are this kind of like this religious-based, tech-heavy, almost unstoppable group of killers that just go after mutants and just annihilate everything in their paths. And here in the show, they're just kind of like a bunch of rednecks that are completely like not even that coordinated until Jace joins them and kind of makes them. He has a little bit more military flair to him. But they feel like they could have did a little bit more. It'd be kind of interesting to see like these people that they're so religious they feel that mutants must be eliminated. Like this is a mission from God. They could have been. I mean, you don't want to get too campy with it or too corny with it, but I think you could have maybe do that in there a little bit more. I don't know. And otherwise, on that, Jace's storyline was pretty good overall, but he kind of would go from regretting what he's doing to suddenly totally on board with it again and back and forth. That's another thing I wanted to mention. Very little was really brought up from the X-Men lore this season. You know, a couple minor characters pop up. There's nothing like jumps out. Obviously, you know, the Spellstruckers, history being a little bit explored better as Fenris, but they just kind of stuck with their own mythos, which is okay. But when it's the X-Men, you want to see them, you know, dig in a little bit deeper. Also, kind of annoying that everyone and their mother seem to mention Lorna's father. That's Lorna's father. He's royalty. He's this. He's that. But they still refuse to have any character say the word Magneto. They just cannot. It's just kind of silly. They can't. No one can say, hey, flat out say her dad's Magneto. I don't care if he never shows up in the show. Just to take that step to acknowledge it. Just can't. It's weird that they can't cross that hurdle. I think that's about it. I'm gonna go through my notes. I don't have a ton to say about the show this season. It just seemed like a lot didn't happen. It would start to happen and then kind of nothing, and then it would start to happen and nothing. I think it was really just the character drama that helped propel it. I wasn't too blown away with Andy's new look. I mean, it grew on me as the season went on, but it looked so dramatically different than last time we saw him. So a lot of the flashbacks were kind of weird. Like some of them were definitely interesting to see where these characters are at one point. A little cheesy that Thunderbird was basically doing the Wolverine route, like just hanging out and cage fighting people. But I think it's a lot of times flashbacks like that are lazy narrative. It's just basically like that episode saying, oh, by the way, this happened 20 years ago and now is relevant to what's going to happen later in the episode. Like it's not even, just people not giving faith in the audience to remember what happened in an earlier episode sometimes. But some good emotional moments. I like the stuff with Eclipse, meeting his daughter and then having to leave, and there's some strong stuff there. Again, you kind of got ruined a little bit by the Reva's powers that don't seem to make much sense. Again, since it's X-Men and mutants, digging into some real world issues and basically getting into racial profiling and how it would apply to mutants. Also, you get later on to like the talk shows that are like basically far right. Another one, just like I said, look, there was this big mystery about who Reva was contacting, and then it ended up being more or less two things: her setting up the one guy to get her into the bank, and then also her working with I don't remember the character's name, but the right-wing talk show host, which that was kind of a letdown. Later on, it was kind of interesting to see her playing both sides against each other, but I don't know, it was kind of a mediocre twist. Then later on, there's definitely some great, again, not just Eclipse and the Baby, but Eclipse and Laura had some fantastic moments, just great acting. A little surprised, but I really actually am not that disappointed that it looked like we'd get some love interest for Lorna, and it didn't happen. That's kind of 2 seasons in a row. Like I said, she doesn't need necessarily have a boyfriend to make her interesting, but it's just kind of weird to kind of tease it and then just not do anything with it. I thought Rebecca's character was a little over the top crazy, like it's almost too much. Like she was supposed to be, more of a hard ass than Reva, but I guess she served her purpose. Notice that it's kind of corny that the Inner Circle had Fade on their side, and he only was used like when the plot called for it. Like if you saw him in an episode, it was only because they were going to use him, not because he was actually hanging out there, unless he was invisible every other episode. Reminds me of something I read once, that if you're watching The Simpsons and they're at home and Grandpa Simpson's there, he's only there generally because they need a joke about Grandpa. Like otherwise he wouldn't just be hanging out at the house. So it's kind of a hint that they're going to be using him. It's very vague about the new recruits for Reva's Inner Circle. They supposedly did some big tragedy, but it was never really explained upon enough to make it seem like it was that horrible. And they just kind of seemed like lightweight jerks. And also, the mutant version of 9/11 is referenced a lot, and they just still never show enough of it to make it feel like it was something on a 9/11 caliber incident that affected the country and just changed the world as we know it. There was some kind of fight and some explosions and a lot of people died, but it was so vague. It just never like hits like, wow, this was devastating. Kind of silly in the end. Like Purifies had this place surrounded, this big, military mastermind kind of character. Jace has got everything under control, and they're just distracted because Thunderbird ran out and started like beating people up, and looking like he was doing wrestling moves on people, and that was enough to distract them so the car could get away. Can't believe he fell for that. Again, the end, the kids acting really sold the impact of Reed dying, because he wasn't like the greatest character, but they were so sad about it, and they did such a good job. It made it like you could get you in the heart a little bit. Again, a little too vague with Blink showing up, having kind of Age of Apocalypse style powers, being able to throw the daggers to open a portal. I don't know if it's supposed to be our Blink that's been changed by wherever she was at, like another dimension or another timeline, or if it's supposed to be a different version of Blink that came forward. I mean, she seemed to know the Mutant Underground characters, so it'd be interesting to see where they go with that, but not super interesting. I really want to see what this world is, but it's enough to be like, okay, I'd like to see. But who knows if the show's coming back. Fox, was bought by Disney. It's going to be up to them. I don't know if they want to have one franchise on TV that's a different version of the X-Men that they're probably going to have in the films. I don't know. But I don't got a ton to say. I give this season a 2 out of 5. It just never really got out of first gear, and it would start to kind of get somewhere, and then it would be a lackluster payoff. Thanks for watching. If you want to read this, the other version is a review. It's on my soundedbettermyhead.com. I have other reviews on there. I have my comic strips, and that's it.